This is a scoop from Axios. They say that President Trump and Secretary of State Marco Rubio have orchestrated a vast restructuring of the National Security Council, reducing its size and transferring many of its powers to the state and defense departments. A White House official told the news outlet that the reorganization is Trump and Rubio's latest move against what they see as Washington's deep state.
It is part of a plan to dramatically downsize the advisory body, which has already undergone major restructuring during the second Trump administration, including the replacement of NSA Mike Waltz with Marco Rubio, who is wearing two hats, serving as Secretary of State as well, and the firing of 5 key aides in April on the advice of far-right activist Laura Loomer.
Hello, Bobby Jones standing in for Ken Harbaugh for MeidasTouch Network and Valor Media. I want to show you something. I want to show you how historically the United States of America, ever since becoming a superpower, has looked at its national security setup. This is what we call DIME. That's diplomatic, informational, military, and economic. These are the basic categories that the United States military, the United States national security apparatus, and all other agencies like the CIA, FBI, etc., look at the holistic national security picture of the United States and its allies. Well, in very underreported news here recently, the clip you just saw shows Donald Trump reducing the number of members of the National Security Council. I think people need to really pay attention to this because it has some significant ripple effects. So let's start with what exactly is the National Security Council? Why does it exist? How did it come to be, et cetera, et cetera? The original National Security Council setup was established in the National Security Act of 1947. That massive act, which created a separate Air Force and renamed the Department of Defense from War Department. It created the CIA. All these things that we now take for granted were established in that reorganization of how the United States looks at national security now that it's a superpower. President Harry Truman signed it into effect. And from that point on, it was meant to create a nexus or a unified way of thinking about national security, both internally within the United States and then internationally outside the United States. Over the course of time, the role and the membership of that organization has changed. It now includes the vice president, the secretaries of state and defense, the national security advisor, et cetera, et cetera. But these things coming together help formulate the foreign policy of the United States. And they've had to do some heavy hitting, a lot of near misses, like the Cuban Missile Crisis, for example, or the response to the 9/11 attacks. All of those things came through the National Security Council. It's broken up by regions, and the different regions have different members and large numbers, but holistically it's supposed to provide the best guidance for the President of the United States to make decisions that impact not just the United States, but the world. So let me explain to you the ripple effect of the reduction in staff and the overall reduction of the National Security Council's influence since President Trump's administration has come back into office. Let's start with the D, diplomatic. In the diplomatic role, the National Security Council works hand in hand with the State Department, but also with the military and development groups to basically put regional experts together and use soft power where necessary, right? In order to do that, you have to have cultural understanding, historical recognition of things that have happened in the past. Well, by lessening those numbers, and particularly in areas like the Middle East, which is reportedly has happened, you weaken that ability to understand comprehensively the power. You also raise the stakes for the military to basically be the person to erase and stop some of these things that you're dealing with. Let's look at the I, informational. The role of the National Security Council, it synthesizes all the intelligence for decision making and strategic messaging. This is huge because especially previous to 9/11, it was this disconnect that allowed the 9/11 attacks to happen. We had all these different intel organizations, but they weren't talking to one another at all. They could not coordinate information. That has gotten better because of reorganizations. We have a national director of intelligence, et cetera, et cetera. But by, again, reducing the number of people, and then in this case, putting in someone who's just a loyalist like Tulsi Gabbard instead of a subject matter experienced expert, we're looking at a comprehensive degradation of intelligence. We've ignored intelligence dealing with Russians. We've shut down counter disinformation efforts to purge some of the things that have affected our elections and our actual function as a society. And then we're not even talking about the possible military gaps, intelligence gaps that make us less safe. So as you reduce the number that support the NSC while putting loyalists in positions of power, are we getting the best information to make the best decisions for the United States and our allies? Probably not. Now, let's look at the M, military. Very, very directly, people think about national security and military hand in hand, as they should. But what the National Security Council helps the president do is come up with or determine the best use of force decisions for the military and any agency that works with it. So when you're looking at, Trump and what he's done, things that have happened to undermine that security making decision apparatus by removing subject matter experts. But most importantly, also, you're talking about taking the number of flag and general officers and shrinking those down to some who had very specific roles that directly plug into not just military operations, but overall strategic thought processes. That's not a good combination. You remove the actual on-field commander, and then you also remove the support and the intelligence and the decision-making at the same time. There's no way we can sit there and say we're better equipped to deal with a crisis or joint operations that are required due to the crisis. These are things you cannot go back and fix instantaneously once you kick it out the door. But we have seemed to do exactly that. And then finally, economics, the E. The National Security Council uses sanctions, trade policies, economic tools to create strategic leverage for the United States. That is historically how it's been throughout the decades since it was established. Well, I don't have to tell you, but economically, with the tariff policies that have been in place, we have seen an unpredictable economic climate take over the entire world. And it was instigated by the United States and Donald Trump not possibly listening to the National Security Council's recommendations. He is hardwired to believe that tariffs are the way to go. That is something that he came up with in the 1980s and 90s, and he's sticking with it. But the yo-yo effect of the tariffs coming and going creates the economic insecurity, which has a ripple effect of destabilization across the board. We're talking about vulnerable supply chains for economics and vulnerable supply chains for military action if necessary. And now you're looking at countries turning their backs on the United States and looking for other allies, both economically and then possibly following militarily due to the back and forth that we're showing in the economic sphere. And the National Security Council is basically not being listened to. You can see it on Fox Business, Bloomberg, all of these other subject matter experts on the economy. The instability is killing the trust in the United States-led economic system of the world. So what does all this mean? In my humble opinion, this means you're losing a lot more subject matter expertise, and you're couching it under getting rid of bureaucracy. There's a way to do both. But once you have people who spent their entire professional careers studying a subject matter and you dismiss them, it's hard to recall them. The National Security Council is supposed to be a repository of ready, relevant information that gives strategic guidance to the President of the United States. And by reducing these numbers, especially in areas of the world that are more volatile than others, you're looking at a situation where you're now less equipped to make informative, effective decisions. Couple that with the replacement of career people who know these subjects with loyalists who have little to no experience. It is a powder keg waiting to explode, especially in times of crisis. We've already seen it internally with FEMA. You're starting to see it internationally with Gaza and with Ukraine. These things that are basically being coalesced so the president can make these decisions on gut instincts should scare a lot of people. The instability of the worldwide economy that has happened is the most immediate effect of these decisions. However, long term, we're talking about a strategic shift that the United States, its allies, and the rest of the world may take decades to overcome.
New Meidas merch drop! Check out the latest pro-democracy sticker packs, t-shirts, hats, sweatshirts, and more, all at store.meidastouch.com.